Hello, my name is Nicola Lambrechts, and I'm here to talk to you about communications planning. Let's begin. The first question you may ask is, why do I need to build a communications plan? What I'm going to do is take you through the steps that go into a plan, but before I do that, let me talk about what a communications plan can do for you and your organization. A communications plan at the end of the day is about supporting your business efforts. It's not about communications for the sake of communications, but it's helping ensure streamlined, efficient communications to help you achieve your business goals at the end of the day. It could be for your organization as a whole, or it could be for a specific initiative or project. It may be an annual plan, or it may be a plan for something that lasts a couple of days or a couple of weeks. At the end of the day, it's your guideline, it's your map to guide your communications and ensure that you're being efficient and strategic with what you're doing and what you're saying. So let's talk about the overall elements, and then we're going to dive into a few more details. The fundamental elements of a communications plan is really looking at your audiences, your messages, what are you saying to them, what's the strategy to reach them, and the specific tactics, all to achieve your desired business outcome. So we're going to step it out. Let's get going. Now, the first thing you may want to think about doing before you even start to think about your audiences and strategy is getting a really clear sense or snapshot of where you are today. What's happening in the environment that you're operating in that could influence your success moving forward? So what's happening within your organization? Are there factors that could constrain your ability to communicate, or factors that could help you? Perhaps you've hired someone new that could focus in on your digital activities. What's happening outside of your organization? Are you competing with other organizations? Are there funding issues that could be on the horizon? Are there other organizations and other jurisdictions that you can tap into for resources and information? So getting a really clear sense of that. Other factors to consider is what's happening in the media. So often the first thing we do when we're doing communications planning is just doing a quick scan. It could be a Google search. It could be looking online, looking at what videos and other tools may be out there on social media that could guide or at least give you a clearer sense of the environment that you're operating in. It's also important to look at government and other organizations that may play a significant role in the success of your organization. So once you've done that, what we like to do is what we call a SWOT analysis. So what are the strengths and weaknesses that exist within your organization today? Where are you? Do you have a particular differentiator that many other organizations don't? Is there a concern that's on the horizon that you need to address? What are those weaknesses that could factor into your success long-term and short-term? And with that in mind, what are the opportunities and threats? So what are those things that could be coming up in the future that really will allow you to leverage your communications to be more successful, or threats that could influence your success over time? So the SWOT analysis really guides the direction and the starting point of where you need to go. And it's where you need to go for your communications objectives. So in thinking about your desired business outcome, what are those communications objectives that you want and need to achieve? What's that vision? So for example, it could be that you want to increase awareness of your organization in a new jurisdiction, or it could be that you want to recruit more volunteers. So how can communications support you with that business objective? And so that's how you build out your communications objectives, and those are the things that you need to be thinking about. The next step is thinking about your audiences, that first circle in the formula, the communications planning formula. So who are those key audiences and stakeholders? We like to think about internal audiences. It could be board members, it could be volunteers, it could be employees, as well as external audiences, whether that's government, industry, other organizations that you could be partnering with. Those are and having as broad and comprehensive a list as possible. I try not to identify the general public as an audience, because often if I do some thinking around that, I find I can break it down even further. So you may want to increase awareness in a new jurisdiction. Who are those people that you need to be reaching there? Is it students? Is it parents? Is it children? So breaking it down even more will allow you to really focus and be targeted in your communications. The other consideration is to really think about ranking your audiences and stakeholders. And I like to rank them based on two factors. The first is their ability to influence your organization. So how influential are they to the success of your organization? And rank them perhaps 1 to 3 or priority high, medium, and low. You want to then cross-reference that with their ability to be influenced. So how much can you influence them? So a volunteer, for example, may not have a huge ability to influence your organization, but they are there as ambassadors representing your organization. But you have a very high ability to influence them, for them to get a greater understanding of what's happening in your organization. And you can use that and channel your communications, particularly if you're wanting to increase profile or recruit more volunteers. So take the time to do that. To prioritize it is really critical to, again, being focused and strategic in your communications. So the next question to ask is, what do your audiences need to know? What do you need them to feel? What emotion do you want them to have? And this is where we think about the messages. So what are you going to tell them to help them get a greater understanding of you and your organization and what you're trying to do? Now, we talk about messages or a narrative. A narrative is typically the story, and quite often people find it's easier to start with a narrative. Who you are, what you're trying to do, where you're focused and where you're not focused. That's the narrative. And from the narrative, you can pull out your messages. We try to limit the messages to 3 or 4 primary messages. Any more than that, and it's hard to remember them, and it's hard to talk about them, and it's also hard for the people that you're talking to remember them. So we try to keep fairly short and tight. The next is you may want to think about the proof points. So if, for example, you're trying to say, we're one of Canada's largest sport organizations. What's your proof point? We have more members than any other organization. So it doesn't have to be complex. It just has to support with those additional evidence points to help you push your message out there. The other thing to consider is to customize your messages slightly by audience group. So what you may say to your employees who are dealing with the organization and part of the organization every day could be quite different from your volunteers who aren't necessarily part of your organization on a daily basis. The next thing to think about in that formula are the strategies. So you've identified what your business outcomes are. You've identified what your communications objectives are. You have a very clear sense of your audiences, and you know what you want them to hear and know. The next thing to think about is, how are you going to reach them? Is it through the media? Is it through community relations? Is it through digital strategies? Or perhaps it's events and advertising. These are largely, and many people will choose probably media relations first because it reaches a lot of people if you can be successful. But the challenge with media relations is it's a very crowded market. The media environment is getting smaller and smaller, and it's harder to get your story out there. You've got a lot of competition. But one of the real opportunities really around digital strategy, and we've all seen the success of social media in recent years, and it's very effective to reach your specific audiences. So you may set up a volunteer Facebook page. You may set up a Twitter account to be engaging with some of your top donors. So thinking about, how are those people getting information? How do you want them to get information? And how are you going to reach them? So this is really where you decide your strategy mix. And we're going to talk about some of the other decision-making that goes into that. I do want to say, though, that it's not strategies and communications for the sake of communications. At the end of the day, it's really important to be thinking about what is going to help your organization move along, advance, and do better at the end of the day. So you may not want to take on advertising. You may not want to do events. You may want to specifically focus in on social media, your digital strategies, and think about stakeholder engagement at a later time. Or if you're heavily funded by government, you may want to spend a lot of time engaging with government and making sure that they have a very clear sense and understanding of who you are and what you're achieving. So the next step is to think about the activities and specific tactics. So, for example, if we take digital strategies. So what's your digital plan for the coming year or for the project or the initiative that you're working on? Do you need to revamp your website? Do you need to create a Twitter account and start to build your followers? What about a Facebook page? Part of it is also understanding where your audiences are engaging. So If your audience groups are all in Facebook, chances are you want to be on Facebook too. But you may not want to do everything in the first quarter of every year or right away. You may want to stretch it out and build it out. And that's about sustaining and maintaining momentum. So I like to think of it as a wave. You're going to have peaks and valleys along the way that will help you sustain and over time build awareness and build what you want to achieve through your communications. So if you're thinking about an annual communications plan, it's typically a 12-month calendar. But I guess a note of caution below is you may want to consider what some of those other external events are, those other things that are happening out there that could impact timing. So if you have an annual event that takes place every fall, what are you doing in the spring so people aren't just hearing from you once a year? A bit more on activities and tactics. So if you're thinking about those lists of activities and tactics, there are 3 key decision points that factor how big or how large you may go. The first is resources. Are you a team of 1, a team of 20, a team of 200? So what resources can you tap into within your organization? What resources are dedicated to helping you achieve your communications and business objectives? How much of a budget do you have? Do you need to put an event for $1,000 or do you have $100,000? That can influence the size and scale and obviously is a factor for all of us. The other thing is materials. So not only, for example, if you're building your website, do you have, you need someone to prepare those materials, you also need to be thinking about how do they need to be presented in a way that makes sense for your specific audience groups. And that's really where your key messages come into play. Once you've got those messages, they flow into all of your materials throughout the year. And then finally, with those pieces in place, so you have your communications plan. So ahead of audiences, thinking about what's the environment, doing the research and analysis in advance, what are your strategic communications and business objectives, who are those audiences, what are your messages that you need them to know, and how are you going to reach them? What are the specific tactics? What are you going to do on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis? And at the end of the day, what's the desired business outcome that you're trying to achieve? That's the question to ask all along the path. Are we farther along? Are we closer to achieving our outcome?